Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of 13th July 2021. Welcome everyone here and anyone that's online, and Steve. Any apologies? To date, we've received no apologies. So someone like to move that we receive apologies. John?
Chair, we did receive one apology through.
Just Grant Tremaine.
Oh, Grant Tremaine.
The acting ops managers can't make it today.
Thank you, Tony. And someone to second that? I'll second Tim. For those in favour? Aye. The declaration of interest. The interest register has been circulated via Microsoft Teams, and there's also a hard copy that is floating around here. So just like to pass it around. Okay. I'll take this urgent items not on the agenda. Right. And minutes of the last meeting, the West Coast Wilderness Trail Subcommittee meeting, which is 13th of April 2021. So, thank you. I'd like to move that the minutes of the West Coast Wilderness Trail Subcommittee meeting held on 13th April 2021 to confirm, true and current record of that meeting. Someone like to move that? Move to Tony. And second, Tim. All those in favour? Also, the chair's statement, I approve that my digital signature be added to the confirmed West Coast Wilderness Trail Subcommittee meeting minutes of 30 April 2021. The action list that's going to be read by Simon. Thank you, Simon.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'll just take you through the action list one by one. The first action, Milltown Weir Crossing. This action has been put on hold until we explore further options regarding routes around that weir and also through Milltown. The second action, Manipur Historic Bridge Highway Crossing. We've engaged Stantec into that discussion. They've submitted a draft review of the crossing, and it's going to be tabled later today in the report. West Coast Wilderness Trail 20-year plan, route plan, that has been completed and now endorsed as part of the long-term plan. So that program action is completed. West Coast Wilderness Trail is listing exiting onto Highway 6. This we picked up as part of a wider safety review. It'll be in conjunction with Jackie Burden, Destination Western and council staff. Only referring to the trail on the south side of the Tuamacau. Once again, the second point, point 5, the trail safety audit. That's still to be scheduled and completed. We anticipate that to be done in the next 2 months. And the last item there is a quarterly track maintenance program to be circulated from Destination Western. It was an oversight. We should have this as a standing item on this agenda, so we'll include it in the next subcommittee meeting. If you take questions, Chair.
Questions? Thank you, Simon. I'd like to move that we received the update action list and we received. Someone like to move that? I'll move. Tim and John. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. The next presentation is from the Jackie Gurdon, the trail manager of the West Coast Wilderness Trail. She's all yours, Jackie.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, apologies for not being with you physically today. I've been down with a week with bugs that have altered my plans. Anyway, what I'm going to work through today, I'll just talk very briefly to the survey, the 2 lots of surveys you've got in front of you. And then I'll talk a little bit about the economic assessment report that I've done. I did go over that last meeting, but didn't have the formal report in front of us at the time. So I'll cover off those today, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Cycle Trail Trust and a couple of things we've got coming up with that. So firstly, looking through these surveys. Now, these surveys are the ones that I talk about that we do continually throughout the year for New Zealand Cycle Trails. So it's a lot of work that's involved with these. New Zealand Cycle Trails want at least 300 a year to maintain our funding. They ideally want 500 a year. At the moment, we've got about 640, and we're sitting at the top of New Zealand Cycle Trails responses to this. So pretty happy about that. But for us, more so because it's giving us good data on our trail. It's not about competing for numbers of surveys. So with that background, what New Zealand Cycle Trails do formally is this review through a company, analysis through a company called GetSmart in Wellington. They analyse the data and then they break it down. And each month, on the first of the month, we get a survey and it compares our trail with the last month with the last 12 months, and also benchmark that against the rest of New Zealand. So that's what you're looking at there. And you can see that the Wilderness Trail, to me, bats incredibly well in that. Our Net Promoter Score and our satisfaction levels are well above the average of other cycle trails. I believe that when you get a Net Promoter Score of about 60, it's meant to be pretty good. And obviously we're sitting up there, you know, mid-80s and sometimes creeping higher than that. So really happy with that. Jump down to things like awareness of the trail. We know with a lot of things it's word of mouth. That drives everything. Obviously, quite pleased with our website. We don't do a lot of work necessarily in social media because we don't have the funding resources for that. But our website being on 24% versus all the other trails down 12%, I think is pretty good. The next box I'll just talk about for a minute, local versus visitors to the region. Now this data is skewed. We don't spend a lot of time, our surveys largely come from visitors to our trail rather than someone solely standing random out on the trail interviewing cyclists. I do spend quite a bit of my time and have some volunteers that do work on the trail getting the data through, but we also get the email addresses from accommodation providers. So it is skewed towards visitors. I think that one of the really important facts when it asks the question of how many people are coming here specifically for the trail, and that's sitting way up at 85%. So without the trail, 85% of our visitors, these visitors wouldn't be in our region, and I think that's pretty key. The next question they've got is about what sort of bike are you riding. Now, I've been back to New Zealand Cycle Trails in the last month and asked them to clean this question up. I think there are too many options there, and you do wonder, you know, when you've got 2 or 3 categories of e-bikes and you're not someone familiar with bikes, what category you should be ticking. So my understanding of the trail is we've actually moved now to from about 17 or 18% as e-bikes before COVID, right through now to sitting on probably about 44, 45% of our trail is e-bikes. Number of nights that people stay on the trail, that figure's looking good. And the number, almost 40%, are actually extending your visit to see other things, is also very good. Time spent on the trail, 4 days. I point out the fact that some trails, they've got, 1 to 4 hours. We are sitting well above a lot of trails in the length of time, and that reflects to me the economic benefit and spend that we're getting on our trail from visitors. The next series of graphs you've got are the ratings. They rate our trail against all sorts of things. Riders are asked to tick the box at how they think we perform in all these areas. Some of them relate to the services they're getting from the companies, and some of them relate to the trail itself. And all those boxes, I think you'll see that we are both in the last month and the last 12 months above the average for all New Zealand, and in some cases well above the average. So that's a really good sign for us. The next section we've got is where people have given us feedback on the trail, and most of the feedback you'll see is pretty good. There are things that we need to look at with, for example, I referenced in the last month, signage in and around Hokitika and some of the signs fading. We've certainly picked up the signs fading with the work that we've been doing out on the trail ourselves, and we'd probably need to do a wee bit more and decide is this actually an issue around the signage getting out to Hokitika or not. The next area we've got is gender, and to me that often is split around 50-50 male female, or slightly more female coming through there. Our age, we've known for a long time, is that 60 to 69 age group, and then the 50 to 60 age group. So very much our older market coming in there. We have always been Auckland and Canterbury as our two big feeders into our trail, quite significantly above everyone else. So we work to that with our marketing as well. It would be nice to lift some of our other neighbours like Nelson and Marlborough, and that's where some of our media has gone to. But certainly Canterbury and Auckland out there significantly ahead as our main feeders. Just jump very quickly, and I don't have a lot to say about the quarterly economic report that you've got in front of you. These reports, as I said, are quarterly, and they look at the spend that's been made by riders on the trail and how much that is. You can see the Wilderness Trail is one of the well above the average, and clearly that $1,900 of visitor a trip has really jumped out as the most we've actually ever had. And that reflects back on the economic contribution that the trail is making. So that would be my very quick summary of the survey data you've got in front of you, and I'm happy to take any questions on that now before I talk about the economic assessment report.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I just on that 85% of visitors use the trail. Where does that is that 85% of all visitors to the West Coast?
No, this is of the trail. This is data from riders on the trail.
Yeah. So what's the 85% then?
So where we're looking at, hang on, I'll just scroll through to it and make sure I'm in the right place as you.
Yeah.
I think what we're talking about is 85% of the visitors have come here specifically to ride the trail. So they haven't come here to go to the Wild Foods Festival and then ride the trail, or to visit friends and relations and ride the trail as part of it. Their prime reason for coming is to ride the trail.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
Jackie, Simon here, how are you? I know you're in Chatham Islands at the moment, and they've got 0 written on the trail. I hope you're promoting that.
Very good.
Just to
Sorry, I missed the question.
Are you doing publicity in Chatham Islands at the moment?
No. What do you mean by the question?
Oh, they have had 0 here in the last 12 months on our surveys, that's all. Can you point out?
Sorry, no.
Can you point out to the committee when the next economic development or economic report is due?
So just to clarify a couple of things. the economic report that is done in conjunction with the survey that I've just referred to, that comes out quarterly. The economic assessment report that I'm about to talk to is something that I do, and I do that on an annual basis after the end of June. So this one was late. It was quite COVID impacted, but it was probably, for me, I just have had so much on. It's a bit of an extra that I do for the Wilderness Trail. So the economic assessment report with the graphs on it, similar to the monthly one, comes out quarterly, and this other one will probably be about 2 months away max, Simon.
So pretty well on time for the next subcommittee meeting. No pressure.
It should be. It should be. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say I'm delighted that Jackie's presenting this data to us today. I, as chair of the trust, I've read this for the last couple of years and been absolutely enthralled by the accuracy and the data that's been collected, and it should be reflected of Jackie's hard work. As I say, New Zealand Cycle Trails estimate or require around about 300 surveys to be done. Where I think, Jackie, at 600 for the year, are we?
We're 640. It rotates like each month they take out the 12-month figures. Yeah.
So the fact that we are number one with collecting this data is great, but also to the accuracy of it and the information that this pertains to improving the trail. Some simple things that we can report back to the owners of the trail and recommend it, and you can see it anyway. But also to the thing to extrapolate out of this is the economic value that this trail is creating for us all and the owners. And given the fact that once COVID and the world starts to open up, this data we've got really here reflects New Zealanders using our trail, not the Australians or the Americans coming in. So there's a great opportunity. This is going to be exponential, but we must take on board some of the feedback, I think. So thank you for allowing it to be presented here. And I think it should be, if not a regular report, at least a summary update at every meeting.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Yeah.
If there are no more questions, I'll move on to the economic assessment report.
Yeah, just before you do that, Jackie, just like to note the lateness of Councillor Haddock at 5 minutes past 3, please. Thank you.
Heavy traffic.
Okay, thanks, Jackie.
Right. Yeah, I think just following up from John's comments with the survey too, this main body of it is continually very high. I think the thing that we need to watch, particularly watch, is just those comment box and that feedback for anything that we can be doing out on our trail, rather than necessarily going through all the statistics all the time, because they are consistently high, but the comments is where there's really good value for us as well to watch that piece. Right. I'll move on now to this economic assessment report. So this actually is for last year, not for this year. So as of June, end of June last year. So COVID did get in the way of it, and certainly with all the work that we've been doing since then. So it's a little bit late, but I did actually report this data at our last meeting, but the report's there now. Why I think this is important is with doing these each year, it documents each year what has happened on the trail. And I think those case studies too, we're watching specific businesses, you know, over time and looking back, we'll be able to see the growth that has happened from day one on the trail. So instead of missing out a year, which we could have done through COVID, I thought it was important to maintain this anyway. And I think with the growth that we've seen pop out the other end of it, and some companies reporting their higher years, some of their best years out of it, is good historical data as well. So pretty much the economic assessment report, some of what is in this, you'll see our survey data, and our trail counter data feeds into this as well. And we've just, now that we're starting to get a track record of over a year's worth of counter data behind us, again, it's another valuable tool. Trail numbers, so looking at, from what we understand, the trail numbers, people that ride the full trail is probably about 5,500 roughly riding the full trail, and that number is taken off the counter at Ross. We on that stretch, and an amount taken out for local riders, and obviously people, we're assuming that they're the main ones that are actually completing right through and doing the lot. There are about 14,500 that are estimated by a calculation that MB did that are riding on the trail. I myself personally question the makeup of how they arrived at that figure, but it is it's a number that, if we manage the same each year, is probably quite close to what's happening out on the trail. We also monitor the bikes on the trail and the bike hires, just watching that trend and things like bike hires. So, you know, and we've seen a significant growth in that. Going back in my introductory in this report too, you know, we've seen the growth of many companies through this. I think about Cycle Journeys, Kiwi Journeys, Glory Days, which is now New Zealand Cycle Tours, the growth of Scenic Waterways, Kamara, and then look at the other spend data that we've got there, with nights or days on the trail, $248 a person, and the length of stay getting up near 4 days, and the impact of the trail at 13 million with no multipliers with it. And what I say to people thinking about that is the trail, I think last year we were talking about 10 million. The trail is actually performing, giving a direct return back at already more per year than what it cost for the entire trail to build. So that's a good sort of logical way to think about it when we talk about $1 million of return. And GDP, talking to Martin Jenkins about that, and quickly got a figure of 5.3 million is the impact on West Coast GDP from the trail. We look at rider numbers in this report, and you'll see there that we have, I'm just scrolling through to it on mine. So you can see here what we've taken for the year at each of those counters, both with cyclists and with pedestrians. Quite clearly, the places close down like Kororo and Canary Tram, the numbers of walkers and joggers is right up there. The more remote places, it's mainly cycling that we're seeing coming through with that. I did a calculation about 2 or 3 months back and looked at the data, and this year's data was about 30% up. So I'm picking that that's probably about what's happened with the trail. There's probably about 30% growth there. The other thing that we look at, or that I look at in this economic assessment, is business growth. In the last year, we've obviously seen, as I've mentioned, Cycle Journeys. We are now looking at the depot in Greymouth. We're looking at expansion of Kiwi Journeys, of Glory Days, and Scenic Waterways. Been about $1 million in capital investment made through those, mainly through those companies in the trail in the year that this is reporting on. In terms of departures, so we have a look with the tour companies that are going through the trail, and I asked them, you know, how many tour groups did they take in the previous year? It was 284, but now obviously led with Cycle Journeys, it's a lot more. But what I would say with that is a lot of it is smaller numbers, like it's more of their hires as well too, rather than sort of groups of 10 or 12 or 15 people going out on the trail. So that's why that number is different. It's not quite apples with apples. It's a trend that we've seen with the trail. Bike hire, so traditional bikes, we've gone from 148 to about 170 traditional bikes, and the big growth has been in e-bikes, from 17 right up to 60 e-bikes at the time of this report. I have given some case studies of the companies that have grown, and their growth will also be reflected in this coming report that I'll start writing shortly. For the first time, I've also included the section just mentioning the capital build and maintenance that's spent on the trail, and obviously the the Westland District with your 130 was 130,000 was the amount given in capital works in that year, mainly around Lake Canary Stage 1, and also the investment that was made with Trustpower, and then highlighted the maintenance costs spent on the trail by both the Grey and Westland District. I think as we build this report up, we can benchmark it more and more against information that's coming through. So I'm expanding it as I go, and I think it is really important information to reflect and hold for the longevity of the trail. So the final table comes from the annual data at June last year, for the last 12 months, off the surveys that I spoke to just a few minutes ago. Again, we're above with most things. I see we're sort of equal with toilet facilities and food and beverage, but the rest of it, we're all sitting above. So trail performing really well against other trails in New Zealand. Then I've done a little bit of an infographic for you, turning the data into something a bit more visual on the reason for visiting the region. And that's where you can see that the question that I was asked about the 85%, it's sitting on 87%. The reason for your visit was the trail. And I've gone over the rest of the data. You can see our age clearly in that older bracket. Auckland and Canterbury standing out significantly. And the other data that I've already covered over on spend per rider and length of stay. And then I've just done a little bit of an infographic comparing all this to all of New Zealand and how we sit. So I think, yeah, this is the sort of the evidence-based material that has come from an independent source when we talk about how well the trail is performing. It's not coming from us with our vested interest in our trail. It's coming from this other data from third parties. So that's my feedback on the economic assessment of the trail. I'm happy to answer any questions on that before I give you a little bit on what the Wilderness Trail Trust is doing.
Yeah, Tanker here again, Jackie. Thanks for that. I just wanted to know whether you would know what the percentage of e-bikes would be like in terms of use the next couple of years.
Look, I think that e-bikes have been discovered. I think the myths on e-bikes, have gone. I think so many people now, there's often that threshold of the early adopters through to them being every day. And I would pick that it's going to be well over half. I would think, and especially given our demographic, which is older. So I think, we could be looking at 60% e-bikes within the next 2 years. Whether it grows higher or not, I don't know. But certainly our age group, people are busy. They're not necessarily as fit as what they were. So that may grow. We might find that our market shifts to perhaps being a slightly younger market, which I would suggest would not be quite as many e-bikes in that market. But certainly, I think it's going to grow.
Yeah, I just wonder if that'll have an impact on the placement of our facilities, like sort of toilets and accommodation.
I don't think it's going to have any impact on those. I think that people will still need to go to the toilet at intervals on the trail, whether it's obviously less toilet stops, but we still need them. We don't have an excess of toilets out on the trail. I think we've got them pretty much where, on the distances that New Zealand cycle trails want them to be. So I don't think that will impact. One of the things we may find is that that number of nights spent on the trail may decline. But I do think for our market, even on e-bike, our distances and our 4 sections are a good spacing for our target market at the moment. And I also think there's a lot of people riding our trail that aren't there to go as quickly as what they can. They're actually there in groups, in families, really enjoying themselves. And while there's good things to do at each end point for them, I think that we'll see the trend continue with most people.
Thank you, Jackie.
Right.
Any other questions?
The final.
Thanks, Jackie.
No, so the final thing I wanted to cover off, just 3 quick points. Our Wilderness Trail Trust has our annual forum being organised for the 9th of August, and it's at the RSA, and we'll be presenting the latest information on the trail at that. And we actually have Bjorn Switzer, who's the Tourism New Zealand manager for domestic tourism in New Zealand. So one of the key people from Tourism New Zealand coming down as our guest speaker. And Bjorn has actually ridden parts of the trail this summer, and he's spoken at New Zealand Cycle Trails. So he has a really, really good understanding of trails. We are working with Development West Coast Tourism, and we're almost at the end of a $10,000 winter marketing campaign. And I'll be sitting down with Patrick and working through what we do going forward in an ongoing marketing campaign for the trail shortly. And my other comment is that John and I have been looking at the trail funding. We usually have gaming applications and community trust applications that we're working on. Right now, we have completed all the work we've been doing on those, and we've been looking at what we do going forward with this. From a trail trust perspective, we've got the guidebook and the disabled guide that we're working on. We have been talking about the viewing platform at Mahinapua. I've had discussions with Doc on that, and also we have a warning signs made for Kauai that will be included in that as well. And we're always after looking for how we can enhance the Ross Strait. So a collective discussion around those things. Obviously, we can't leverage big money, and we probably need to own most of it. Most of the things in the different applications that we apply for, but that's not necessarily a criteria. So there are a number of other things happening within the Trail Trust, but those are the key ones that spring to mind.
Thank you, Jackie. No other questions? Sorry, John.
Could I just add to Jackie's comments? We have a new iwi appointment. Has that been announced as a trustee? Courtney Sargent from Hokitika.
Oh, yes, sorry, John. Yes.
Is joining our.
I didn't see some document on that.
Good.
John,
and we're very pleased to have that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if someone would like to move that the presentation from the West Coast Wilderness from Jackie Gurdon, Trail Manager for the West Coast Wilderness Trail, be received.
Happy to move that, Tanker.
Thank you, Councillor. And second, Tim, all those in favour? Carried. Also note that received a apology for lateness from Francis Tulahai at 3:26, sorry. And also from the men who worship. Thank you. The next item 7, staff reports. Scott Passendale.
Primary report is the current project update report, which I'm going to take as read. Before I take questions, a couple of areas of clarification. One is to just make people aware that any figures in the budget that relate to carryover will be subject to approval by council, and that's not yet happened. And then the second area is really to point out the appendix at the bottom of the report, which relates to what the Chief Executive was referring to in the actions update earlier on in the meeting, which is the proposal that start taking drafting forwards in relation to how we're going to take things forward with the crossing of the State Highway 6. Quite happy to take questions.
Questions? Oh, thank you. So, someone like to move that the update report from the Rick Manager, District Assets dated 13 July 2021 be received. Move that. Tim, second. All those in favour? Carried.
Just through the chair, just to make a comment regarding future projects. So whilst we have budgets approved in our RTP, every project we put forward, we try to leverage external funding. We know that in major bay rides generally contribute 50% of enhancements. So that'll be a process that council will follow as due course for all of our cycleway projects.
The next item is Simon Bastian. Thank you, Simon.
Good afternoon again, committee members. Just like to table a report and a request regarding the change of the subcommittee naming and also the terms of reference. Through the LTP process, council received a lot of submissions in regards to support of wider aspects of cycling and to a smaller extent regarding walking. We have a very strong mountain bike club within Hokitika, within Westland. We also have other aspects of cycling that we need to incorporate, particularly when we think about youth. If you look at the statistics of the Wilderness Trail now, it supports more of an age bracket in terms of over 50s. We haven't got any, I suppose, stimulation for the younger generation. So what we're proposing with this change of committee structure is to include two new entities. One is a member of the Mountain Bike Club, and second is to invite Walking NZ here. And that purely is around understanding their aspirations and incorporating those in a wider expanse around cycling and walking as a destination for West Coast. So just asking the committee to endorse this. This still has to be approved by the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee as an agreed way forward. Happy to take any questions. But just on one other point, in terms of other parties that are involved only in the West Coast Wilderness Trail, we'll try and adjust the agenda so that topic is covered off first, and then if those committee members wish to depart, be talking about other parts of I suppose non-related subjects to do with cycling and walking that can be carried on after that, as long as we've got a quorum.
Sorry.
Simon, up to the chair. On the walking, is this an area which you see the promoting the trail as a hiking or walking adventure as well as a cycle? Is this where you're coming from?
No. So we're not talking about the cycleway in general. We're talking about other walking areas. We have a heritage walk, for example, and that doesn't get the oversight that the trail does. We have other areas that we actually manage as well in terms of walking trails, but we don't actually have a focus point on that. So what I'm proposing to do with this work is, if we get this endorsed, our asset management plan will include a wider scope of works to include future aspirations of other organisations within council, our oversight on it.
I just raised the point because it's something as a
Just
trust
three.
we have discussed as you know, it's the cycleway, but there's a large number, increasing number coming to our trail to walk it.
Yeah.
So I think it could be incorporated in your bigger scope as well, to say, you know, don't be afraid to walk part or all of the trail as well as cycling. It's a bit like the Ghost Road. From what I understand, their walking has increased significantly ahead of what the cycle.
That'd be good to know, actually, because at the end of the day, you know, the distance between facilities needs to be shortened quite considerably.
Yes, it does.
So taking that into account is something we should consider. Any other questions?
Just through the chair, through the chair,
Yes.
and I'd shared a couple of emails with Simon on this. My not concerned, but one of the things is about the scope, because when you start talking about walking right across Westland, and I'm not quite sure how this fits with Grey District, because we have obviously the Grey District a part of this as well. And I'm not anti these things at all. I'm totally in favour of them. But I do wonder if in presenting this, we need to think about what the scope of walking and cycling is. On different things I've been involved with, it's extended into an awful lot of sort of grey areas and sort of clouded the waters, really. So I raised that. It would be good to know, you know, what's in and what's out and what is actually being referred to. And the other tricky thing is the funding for these things and not being set up to, in some way, you know, we can fund the Wilderness Trail because it's one of the great rides and we've got MD funding there, but not wanting to raise aspirations for things that may not be able to be afforded going forward. So that'd just be my comments with the scope of this. I don't know if you know, perhaps this becomes two parts, whether it's actually built into the overall scope of this committee. You know, I just raised those as concerns.
Just to comment on that, Jackie, I suppose the council consider any appetite for funding through other avenues if they see it's warranted to support another organisation, for example, like Mountain Bike Club. And there may be some contribution from council as well into that. Really depends on hearing the stories and hearing the right messaging that comes from both the entity applying for you know, their aspirations to be met, or whether council have got an appetite to spend.
Through the chair, do you see this sits with Grey District as well? Is that something that, like Peter Haddock has discussed with the council, or are you seeing that it's just more relates to Westland?
We haven't discussed that at the moment, Jackie.
So at this stage, the intention was the additional component would be Westland focused only. We still keep the West Coast Wilderness Trail as the core underpinning asset that this committee oversees and governs. That's why I suggested we table the agenda accordingly to manage that.
Yep. Thank you. They were just questions I had. It wasn't necessarily challenges to it at all. It was just clarity, really.
Yep. So, someone like to move that resolve that the report be received at the West Coast Wilderness Trail Subcommittee endorse the change of the name of the committee to the Cycling and Walking Subcommittee and adopt the amended terms of reference, including the additional membership as in the report, and that the recommendation of the Capital Projects and Tender Committee to adopt the change of the name of the subcommittee, including terms of reference, and approve an additional membership to the subcommittee as noted above. Don't move it. I'll move that. And John, second. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Item 8. To go on public exclusion. Advise the meeting will be adjourned for 2 minutes to allow for the committee to disconnect. Sorry. And we'd like to have a mover on that, please.
I'll move that.
And seconder.
Seconded.
Tim, all in favour?